This all started in 2006. I basically grew up in the poker world. My grandmother was a player-dealer decades ago. Her boyfriend ran a large club in Queens. She started teaching me 7-stud, 5-card draw, and no-limit hold'em, starting when I was 6 years old. We would play with a cheap Hoyle chipset that she had purchased from the local grocery store. Occasionally, I even beat her. I'll never be sure to this day if she let me win, but I'll always hold those memories close. Poker was something we always did together and did often. It would be unusual to see my grandma without a deck of cards on her. As I got older, my whole family would play together. When I reached middle and high school, I would host multi-table $20-50 buy-in tournaments at my house, and there would be about 40 to 50 of us at my house, playing poker, socializing, eating, and doing what kids do. We were all terrible and had no idea what we were doing, but we were all having fun. Little did I know it, but I was getting a taste of what was to come, in terms of my career, later on in life. When I hit 16 years old, a friend of mine from high school, Joey, who had gone off to college in Queens, at St. John's, had come back home for the summer. He had been introduced to a very large, and popular, underground club in College Point, New York. At the time, he was making a regular income from playing small stakes MTTs on Full Tilt instead of having a regular job during college, and naturally found his way into live poker. This was my first introduction to the underground poker world. In addition to playing online with him, I accompanied him, and a couple of his college buddies one night, to play $1 $3 no-limit hold'em at an underground club. I was able to play because I had made some substantial money from running, and eventually selling, my own web hosting business while in high school. My other passion, that I had started learning from a very young age, was computer programming. I was coding in Visual Basic by 11 years old, because a friend of my father's, who was a software developer, had decided that I had shown some aptitude for the field, and took an interest in mentoring me. I was lucky to have been given the opportunity of his time, teachings and books, etc. Anyway, off we went to Fox's club. Fox was the connected mob guy, who owned the club. The game was protected, and everyone knew it. It was a very social place. If you've ever been to an underground club, then you know that the quality of the customer service and experience can vary greatly from game to game. Fox's game was the creme of the crop. It was absolutely top-notch. It ran every day, night and day. It was located in a large, multi-story industrial lot, which sat right near a main intersection, which meant lots of traffic. A very good thing because the traffic to and from the game just blended in with the usual activity. When you pulled in, you could park anywhere you wanted, out of the tens of dozens of spots. It didn't matter where you parked anyway. I'll get to why in a minute. Then, you would walk upstairs to the second story to come stop in front of a giant steel door with a buzzer, and several cameras positioned in front. When you finally entered the room, it was gorgeous, clean, large, comfortable, and was equipped with everything you wanted in a club. A full-sized kitchen, multiple clean bathrooms, one even had a shower, a lounge area, a high-limit room, waitresses, a bunch of large flat-screen TVs, and a smoking room, among other things. The first thing you'd notice was that they had 6 high-quality poker tables paired with executive chairs, not including the one in the high-limit room. This club was spacious. As you walked in, a valet would ask for your keys. He would go fetch your vehicle, and park it in an organized fashion, amongst the others. You'd then make your way over to the podium, and tell the floor which game you wanted to play. They usually had at least several games going. $1 $3, $2 $5, and $5 $10, no limit. Even higher, when it ran. But the higher games were much more private. Strapped with $1,000 in cash on me, I request a seat in the $1 $3 game, and eventually make my way onto the table. The max buy-in was $500, which I opted for, because most stacks at the table were deep. It didn't really matter anyway. This was my first time playing in an underground poker club, and I was nervous as hell. I didn't know how to act and was totally naive to my safety. I was 16 years old and I was clearly the kid in the club. I remember winning one of my first pots, and a mid-30s Asian guy sitting next to me taps me on the shoulder. "Aren't you going to tip the dealer?" he asked. "What do you mean? Are we supposed to do that?" "Of course, they work on tips. When you win a pot, toss them $1. If it's a big pot then maybe a redbird or 2, he said. "I see. I'm sorry, I didn't know," I replied, and I tossed the dealer $1. Over the course of the summer, and after playing there a dozen or so times, I began to take notice how much these dealers were making. Back then, in this particular club, dealers were well taken care of, and I managed to figure out that they were pulling in at least $1,000 per shift, depending on their duties and how long they spent in the box. Some guys had multiple roles and would often spend time on the phone with players. Some would work the cage area. Some would work as floor, etc. The question then dawned on me. Why am I risking my money playing this game, when I could learn how to deal it, and be guaranteed to make money, without any risk? That was when I started to become friendly with Big Mike, one of the regular dealers. I wanted to deal and I wanted a job there. How was I going to make this happen? How could I pass up learning how to make $1,000 a night at a job that looked like it could be a lot of fun? Thinking about it now, the thought of a 16-year-old kid, wanting to learn how to deal poker, in an underground club, and actually turning out to be good at it, is just plain hilarious. But, I was determined to learn this skill, and even though I was a little naive about it, I made a promise to myself that I was going to study poker, and poker dealing. When you are that young, the problem is that your brain is not yet fully developed. And no matter how mature and intelligent someone of that age can be, the fact remains that they have yet to gain wisdom. The kind which can only be acquired through time. I say this because I grossly underestimated the amount of time it really takes to become a solid A dealer. But again, I had drive and determination to learn how to deal. I became friendly with Big Mike, got his phone number, and would text him whenever I wanted to come down to the club. I let him know that I wanted to learn how to deal, and asked him how he learned. He told me that he had gone to dealer school. I didn't know such a thing existed. He wasn't too enthusiastic about me learning how to deal. He said I was too young, and didn't know the game well enough yet. I came to the conclusion that Big Mike wasn't going to help me, and sure enough, he never did in that regard. I kept him as a poker contact, and would eventually be invited to other games and clubs by him. Something that could be really helpful later on. With Big Mike not wanting to teach me, my plan was to go to Fox's to play, and when I wasn't in a hand I was going to study what the dealer was doing. What he did with his hands. How he shuffled. What he said. What he was constantly doing with the chips in his rack. This was how I discovered rake, by the way. I didn't even know what rake is. At Fox's, everybody paid $5 per half hour, when the dealers would make their push. I thought that that was how they were making their money. What I didn't know was that they were also taking a rake. There wasn't a gator or drop box for the rake. It didn't sit out openly in front of the players, as it normally does in casino card rooms. The dealer would quickly take out chips from the pot, and they would go right into the well. Every half, the dealer that was pushing in would replace the well with the one they were carrying. The first time I saw the rake being taken, I was puzzled by what was happening and didn't know what was going on. No one else at the table ever seemed to say anything or even acknowledge it, so I figured it must be okay. When I saw Big Mike go into the smoking lounge for his break, I got up from the table and went inside to ask him about it. He then educated me about rake. I was dumbfounded. This place must be making a shitload of money. 10% of the pot up to $25. I started to do the math on all the tables running, the $5 being taken every half hour, an average pot size for an average rake amount, and came up with an impressive number. Damn, what a lucrative business to be in. During the time I spent watching the dealer, I picked up lots of little things here and there, but ultimately just watching was not enough. I needed some proper instruction. I also knew I needed to learn how to deal the cards the way Big Mike did, with that flick of his fingers, not knowing at the time that it was called pitching the cards. All of this information, all of these techniques. There must be some resources and information on poker dealing on the internet, right? I mean, if Big Mike went to a school that teaches how to deal poker, then there must be some info on where to go. I'd later on make a discovery that would make a huge impact on my life. So, I decided that moving forward, I was going to focus on getting better at the game while I spent my time at Fox's. Maybe Big Mike was right. Maybe I didn't know the game well enough yet. Instead of trying to learn how to deal there, I'll just play the game, and try to win as much money as I can. This didn't turn out so well, as I was not yet a competent player. I had no live experience. I was very easy to read. I made the mistake of engaging in table talk and failing at every verbal jousting I took part in. And I hadn't yet been a real student of the game. I was learning the hard way. Through trial and error, which of course cost me tons of money. I didn't always lose, because I wasn't an idiot, and was intelligent enough to realize that there is actually a skill component to this game. The Asian guy, from earlier, in his mid-30s, the one who politely taught me about tipping dealers, turned out to be a pretty cool guy. His name was Andy. When we first officially met, he asked me about which college I was going to and what major I was studying. "So, are you in college? What are you studying?" he asked. "Actually, I'm still in high school. I haven't yet decided which school I want to go to. I still have a couple of years left," I said. "What? How old are you?" he asked. "I'm 16. I'll be 17 after the summer." "So you can't even drive yet? Is that why you always come by with a friend?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm still saving up for a car. I think I'm going to buy a used Mazda 6. He was curious about where I was getting all of this money I had to play with at the tables. I told him about my computer background and web hosting business. He was impressed and I had earned his respect. He told me that he had initially thought that I was just another one of the college kids that came by to play with money from their parents, or playing with the extra college loan money that was left over, and sent out as a check to students who got loans. We developed a kind of student-teacher relationship. He smoked a ton of cigarettes, and every time he did, I would join him in the smoking lounge and he would tell me his thoughts on how I played certain hands. He would point out mistakes I made, give me positive reinforcement on things I was doing correctly, pull me off the table when I would start to tilt, and overall just looked out for me. Andy was a very good player judging by the fact that he consistently won, and could always give me a logical reason as to why I should do things a certain way. Other people who tried to teach me the game would say things like, "You should have raised on the turn." When I asked why, I would always get the same response. "Because you lost the hand." That made no sense to me at all. That's not an answer. It doesn't answer the question. That's just another way of saying that if I was a psychic and could predict the future, the way I could have won the hand was by knowing what the outcome was and making the right play. Andy would say things like, "You should have raised on the turn." That was when I realized that I wasn't even thinking about what the other guys had. I was just playing my own cards, and when I didn't make hands, I would try to bluff. Sometimes successfully, and sometimes not so much. I was starting to learn the game from a thinking player's perspective. Andy had been playing poker for a long time already, and was an underground grinder. After graduating from college with a degree in finance, he got a job at some firm but eventually left to pursue poker. Between his investments and playing poker full-time, that was how he made his income. He played in tons of games and clubs all around New York and was what you would call an underground pro. At the time, if you were a competent player, it was quite easy to make money in those games. There were tons of fish and people who would literally donate money. In the beginning, I was one of them. So were Joey and his college buddies. Joey was a decent online multi-table tournament player, skilled enough to consistently cash in small tournaments, but he wasn't very good at playing cash games. Especially live cash games. He was too easy to read. So was I absolutely awful at hiding tells, let alone knowing what those tells were. I remember one particular session at Fox's where I was running like God. I had turned $500 into nearly $4,000. I was getting super lucky, super quickly. I'll never forget this session as it was the first time I walked out of Fox's with a huge wad of cash in my pocket. And it started off with the first hand I played that night. I always waited to play until I was in the big blind. This was something Andy advised me to do, as you couldn't come in for free behind the button. Not that I even knew what that was, at the time. Forgive my recollection of this hand. It's rough at best, it was over a decade ago, but it was the first time I saw how brutal poker could be. There was a raise to $15, a re-raise to $50, a call, another call, and in the big blind I looked down at 10-9 suited. I was still superstitious at the time, and always played my first hand, no matter what it was. So I called, and the original raiser called as well. 5 players. The flop comes 10, 10, 9, with 2 clubs, and I check. There's a bet of $150. The next guy jams. The next guy also jams. Another all-in. At this point I remember thinking to myself, holy shit. I quickly call, and so does the guy in front of me. I then turn my hand over. What does it even matter? Everybody is all in. Give me the money, baby. Everyone else follows suit and tables their holdings, while wondering what the hell is going on here. We've got a 5-way all-in, something I'd never seen before. Ace-king of clubs, pocket aces, pocket nines, and queen-jack, which I'm fairly sure was suited. My body was overflowing with adrenaline. The dealer does his work, and the next thing I know, I have $2,500 in front of me, and some really pissed off people sitting next to me. As the session continues, within the next few orbits I managed to pick up pocket aces and pocket kings, stacked 2 players, and it was at this point that I had around $4,000 in front of me. Like I said, running like God. Then, it happened. Thinking I was invincible, I re-raise a guy with 6-4 offsuit. The flop comes ace-4-4. The guy bets and I just go all in, not knowing what else I could do. He then tanks for a minute, and says to me, "You're really that lucky, huh? You got that 4, don't you?" I remember smiling like a teenager who had just lost his virginity. "I don't know what to tell you, but yeah I do, I have 6-4, as I nodded my head, yes. "I believe you," he says, and open mucks ace-king. I showed him the 6-4. I get shipped the pot, and then Andy says to come join him in the smoking lounge. I didn't smoke, but my mother had for years, so it didn't bother me much. "Why in the hell did you tell that guy what you had? You need to learn how to act composed at the table," Andy said. I didn't know what else to do. "It didn't feel right lying to the guy," I replied. "That's because you're a good kid. This is poker. You can't ever feel bad about taking someone's chips, or else you'll never succeed at this game." Well, what should I have done then? What should I have said? For now, the next time that happens, don't say a word. Just stare at the board until the other player makes a decision. You're clearly not capable of table talk yet. If you feel like you have to respond, and can't ignore the other player any longer, then just use my line and tell him that it's on him. "What's your line?" I asked. "Well, I can't lose if you fold," said Andy. And I'll never forget that line. I still use it sometimes to this day. You have to understand that this happened back when you could actually engage your opponent verbally, when it was heads up. Now you can't discuss the contents of your hand whatsoever. That era has ended and table talk is not what it once was. In my opinion, I firmly believe that this particular change in poker was not a positive one. It made poker really fun and really interesting. It was a large contributor to the social element of the game. And it felt really good, when you would successfully talk your opponent into making the move you wanted them to make. Andy continued smoking his cigarette, while telling me I should cash out, and go home with a huge win. How much more money do you really expect to make? You're way too deep now in this game, where everyone is going to start shoving on you. Trust me. Cash out and hang out, until your friend is done playing, so you can go home. What am I supposed to do? Isn't everyone going to get mad that I'm leaving? I asked. Who cares? Sit at the table, and fold everything except aces or kings for the next hour. If you pick up one of those hands, just go all in. Trust me, you have nothing more to gain, and only something to lose, if you continue playing. For the next hour, just watch everyone else, and how they play, and what they showdown. You might learn something. And that's exactly what I did. I folded every hand for the next hour, then cashed out. While I was hanging out, railing Andy and the friend I came with, I realized that I needed to buy a poker table, and the same type of cards they were using at Fox's. They used Cambridge size, jumbo index. Something I had learned about from picking Big Mike's brain. I figured this would be a perfect time to invest in a real poker table, considering that I just cashed out $4,000. Maybe I could start having cash games at my house with my friends and deal the game to practice. I already hosted tournaments at my house regularly, but never thought about hosting a cash game. Would my friends even want to play a cash game? What stakes would it be? I also still need to figure out how I'm going to learn how to deal. I've got some thinking to do. End of part 1.